This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look at how the new pedestrian bridge across the Mississippi River could transform downtown Memphis and West Memphis. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We are joined tonight by a number of people involved with the new Harahan Bridge project. We'll start with Paul Morris, who is president of Downtown Memphis Commission and also the incoming project director for the Main to Main project. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Also Paul Luker, who is director of planning for the city of West Memphis. Yes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Greg Maxted, executive director for the Harahan Bridge project. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
And Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. Let me start maybe biggest picture at the table at least, which is you, Paul Morris. You know, oversight of downtown, what used to be called the Center City Commission, and all kinds of things going on in downtown. A simple question: why is this project to put, at its simplest level or the most basic level, a pedestrian and bike bridge across the Mississippi River? Why is it important?
We think this will be internationally significant. The Mississippi River is something that we in Memphis sometimes take for granted. But it's when people from around the world come to Memphis, they want to see the Mississippi River. It's got a storied history and it's significant for people around the world. And to have an ability to walk or bike across the Mississippi River and look at the Memphis skyline and connect to West Memphis and our friends in Arkansas is going to be a dramatic transformation of our region.
Yeah, and from a West Memphis point of view, Paul Luker, what you all are excited about this project? You want all these people coming over, and do you see traffic going both ways?
Absolutely, you know, when we promote our community, we promote our proximity to Memphis. So when we're out selling West Memphis, we tell people how close we are to downtown Memphis and how close we are to the amenities of FedEx Forum and Orpheum Theater and AutoZone Park, the downtown entertainment mecca. So we promote that. Lots of people that live in downtown Memphis also shop in West Memphis. So there's already a connection there. This will just bring us closer together.
And Greg Maxted, well, there's more to it than just, I mean, again, there's the pedestrian bridge, which the viewers just got to see a kind of animation of, that is joined to the railroad bridge over the Mississippi. But there's also bike lanes and improvements through the downtown corridor, starting up in the uptown area, connecting over to North Parkway where there are bike lanes. Tell us a little bit about how, separate from the pedestrian bridge, and we'll get back to that, but some of the improvements downtown will work.
Part of the grant is a transportation project connecting Main Street Memphis to Main Street West Memphis. And the city of Memphis had some existing projects and existing funding that we wanted to take advantage of, and that was along the Main Street corridor. There's going to be bike lanes, there's going to be sidewalk improvements all the way from North Memphis down Main Street, along the Main Street Mall, and into South Main, near the Central train station, connecting to the Harahan Bridge. There's even going to be a cycle track on Virginia Avenue going up towards Channel 3. A lot of improvements, a really big project. If you think of the scope, it's almost a 10-mile corridor from West Memphis all the way up to Henry and North Main.
Bill.
Let's talk about the West Memphis side of this Paul, because I think a lot of people, there was a lot of discussion early on about levee trails, and that's kind of not the immediate goal of what we're talking about here. You're looking at the floodway, actually, that's over there in terms of trails and linking that to the beginning of Broadway by the old bridge.
That's correct. You know, there is a long-term conversation about the possibility of having trails on the levee, but what the projects that we're looking at now would be to complement the Harahan Bridge project and to take advantage of this great natural area that we're adjacent to with the downtown Memphis and in the Mid-South, and that's the floodway of the Mississippi River. And so we've been working with the National Park Service to explore how to develop those trails in the right way, so, you know, not only for maintenance but also environmental concerns. But it's possible to do, And it's something that we are pursuing, and I think it will be another great amenity to this Harahan Bridge project.
And in terms of access to the Harahan Bridge, is there existing infrastructure on the West Memphis side? Because I believe that from looking at what's there now, you all have a bit more of a foundation in terms of access than exists now.
Well, what we're going to do, there is a concrete bridge structure that is the end of the Harahan Bridge. It's elevated up above the floodway. It's 400 feet long. I think it's about 40 feet wide. And so that's a good landing area when you come off of the Harahan Bridge. Then beyond that, we have the service roads of the interstate that are already there that we're going to utilize for shared use. There is one section about 2/3 of a mile where these roads do not connect up, and we'll have to construct a trail in that area. But a lot of the infrastructure is already there on our side.
Greg, how are we going to get to the Harahan Bridge boardwalk on our side, and how are negotiations going with Church on the River in terms of that access?
To start off with the church, they've been a great supporter of the project from when I first brought it up. They're interested. They're obviously concerned about their property and their parishioners, but they understand the value to the city, and they've been 100% on board. There's actually going to be multiple ways to connect. The main-to-main project will have a connection from Main Street along Carolina to Channel 3 Drive to Virginia, and there'll be a greenway along Virginia between Virginia and the rail tracks that will lead directly to the bridge. But also there's the existing sidewalk on Riverside that if you're walking, you can get to the bridge. There's also the Bluff Walk. There'll be a connection through Martyrs Park to Channel 3 Drive, up to Virginia Drive to get on the greenway itself. So there's plenty of bicycle pedestrian connections that are already there. And to take that to the next step, if you're familiar with downtown, there's already a greenway, some bluff walks all the way down the river from the visitor center all the way up to the bridge. That's all there, we just have to connect it.
Okay. Paul, you've talked for years now with the Downtown Memphis Commission about the needs along the Main Street Mall in particular, before this really came up. So how is this federal and private funding going to address some of those long-standing needs on the mall in particular?
Well, on the Main Street Mall, we have boards on the mall currently. We have loose pavers. We've been suffering from deferred maintenance for more than a decade. So there's a lot of maintenance and upkeep and improvements that need to be made. And with this project, we're able to not just use local funding, but also federal funding, state funding, and some private funds to help leverage those dollars and make some improvements along the Main Street Mall. Additionally, on South Main, which has got so much going on, we've got broken sidewalks and the roadbed's bumpy. So this project's going to allow us to prioritize and increase the investment in those areas. We've got over $100 million being invested in the South Main, mostly private dollars. And with this project, we're fixing the public space to go along with all that private investment. And this goal of trying to have dollars to fix up Main Street Mall and Main Street is what kind of joined us with the Harahan Bridge project and made this one project.
So will there be just logistically, bike lanes all the way down Main Street?
There will not. The bike lanes will be on Front Street. It's going to be a corridor because we didn't want to necessarily mix bikes with trolleys. So the bike lanes and the bike sharrows share the roads are going to be on Front Street.
Okay.
And on the Main Street Mall, we did pass an ordinance last year that allows bikes on Main Street. So you will be permitted to ride your bike on Main Street, but there will be another path if you want to avoid the trolley lines.
Okay. And how did, from your point of view, I mean, again, getting big picture, I mean, there's been so much over the last, 5 years, it seems like, between the Green Line, the bike lanes, the Wharton administration putting emphasis on that. This all connects to that, both literally, and I don't know if it's a question for either of you, but also kind of figuratively. There's been huge demand and huge response to this, to all the greening of Memphis. So,
yeah. Well, it's about making Memphis a magnet for people. We need to have more citizens in Memphis. We need more citizens downtown. And what we saw with the Green Line was a really successful project that didn't cost a tremendous amount of money, and it made the property values enhanced, and people just are more excited about Memphis and living in Memphis. We need more projects like that.
And we talk about price. The price tag on this project, the main to main, everything we're talking about is around $33 million. Is that give or take it? How much was local money, local public money?
Local public money, right now in Memphis, we've got stormwater funds that are dedicated for Main Street Mall drainage. So that is about $8 million, but that was going to be spent on that anyway. So there hasn't been a lot additional there. And then Shelby County is pledged, I believe it's $1 million.
Okay.
And the state of Tennessee has pledged, I believe it's $1 million or $2 million.
Right.
And we've got funding sources from our organization and from the Uptown TIF district kind of cobbled together to match the private funding as well as the $15 million from the federal government.
And from your point of view, how does this tie in with the Green Line and the bike and the bigger picture of Memphis getting outdoors, biking, pedestrian, and so on?
It's a great question. I was on the board for the Green Line, and once it was built, people started asking me, how do I get downtown? How do I get farther?
Right.
The first thing that's going to happen is the city's going to put a cycle track on Tillman and on Broad. And what a cycle track is basically a green line on the road, but separated by traffic by post or column or curb, so that the cyclists and the walkers are safe. Once you're in Overton Park, the city is putting bike lanes on North Parkway. But I'm also hoping there's going to be a bike lane or a bike route on Overton Park Avenue, going all the way down to Bellevue, because in the next 4 years, there's also going to be a cycle track on Jefferson that runs from Cleveland all the way down to 3rd Street. So we'll have multiple routes downtown.
And are you comfortable, I mean, that the expenses are worth it? You know, we did a show, what will be last week when this airs, on, you know, the budget difficulties that the city is facing. You know, there's property tax increase and they're laying off people. The county is facing a property tax increase. I mean, there has to be a viewer, if not some viewers, who listen to this and say, hey, it all sounds great, but that's money that we shouldn't be spending.
Absolutely, and there's studies in other cities where they've made these small investments in bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, and they show the payback on property values increasing, on economic impact, businesses thriving because of it. But the bigger picture, when I talk to politicians, I'm a cyclist, but it's really not about cycling, it's about making your city a modern city, and we have to do it to compete. From a cycling greenway infrastructure, we're probably 25 years behind, and we're just now catching up.
I think it was the head of, I believe, Memphis Green Line. I'm going to screw this up, but we had on, first of the year, who talked about how at 50 miles, if you offer, it's sort of a magic number. If you have for 50 miles of continuous biking, you actually become a destination where people will avid cyclists or semi, they'll come and stay. And I guess the theory then, from an economic development point of view, is you actually can bring in some number of tourists who spend money on a hotel and a restaurant and shops and enjoy the city and maybe come back for other reasons. Is that?
That's exactly right. They may come to see the Harahan Bridge. They can ride their bike across that, but there's other cycling destinations that are easy and safe for them to get to. They will ride and leave money behind.
Right. And you, Paul Luker, do you face some of that? You're in the city, of West Memphis. I mean, was there some resistance to the city spending money on this sort of project during, a lot of this was planned during the recession? I mean, how does that work politically?
Well, it was questioned, but the significance of the project was the vision was there, and our leadership saw it, from Mayor Johnson to Crittenden County Judge Woody Wheelis and Judge Melton Hope before that, State Senator Keith Ingram. All of our leadership over there saw the benefit of this project, and they've been behind it from the start.
So what do the bike lanes look like on Broadway, which, for those of you who don't know, is West Memphis's main street, basically?
Well, those will take shape as sharrows. There's sort of the pavement markings where it tells traffic to watch out for bikes. You're sharing the lane with the traffic. That is already a nationally recognized bike route. It's the Mississippi River Trail, which Greg can probably speak to that a lot better than I can. But there are two legs to the Mississippi River Trail. It's an east and west leg. The west leg comes down our side, the Arkansas side of the river, and continues on south to Baton Rouge and points further. I believe the route on the east side of the river kind of stops at Memphis now, and they're trying to get it designated further, but the Harahan Bridge will be a connector between the east and west leg of the Mississippi River Trail.
Mm-hmm. And we talked before the show a little bit about what is on that end of Broadway as soon as you come off of the bridge, that you're really in a very historic area.
That's true. Not only do you have the historic settlement patterns of the people crossing the river, first on the ferry and then later on the railroad bridges, but then later on in our history we have the blues and the music that congregated on the east end of West Memphis, and you had the Plantation Inn, and so you have all that history. Also, the three bridges that are there now, the two railroad bridges and Interstate 55, they represent a different type of engineering bridge technology. So for people that are drawn to those kinds of subject matter, that's interesting to them also.
Paul, there's a certain number of ADA compliant, when you look at the project, and I think it's, what is it, main2main.com. If people want more pictures and more information, the pictures are pretty interesting, and the maps and so on. We've got some going on the screen, but there are more at main2main.com. A lot of ADA compliance. How does that look, and how does that change the Main Street Mall? I don't know if it's a question for either of you.
Well, I can start, and Greg can pick up where I left off, but the ADA compliance issues are mandatory. It's a federal grant, so we're going to comply with ADA, and we want to do that anyway. But the advantage is that along the Main Street Mall, currently it's difficult to traverse the Main Street Mall in a wheelchair or sometimes on your feet and on a bike because of some of the broken stones. They have drainage issues. We have literally boards, and these are improvements that the city needed to make anyway and would have had to spend that money anyway. And with this project, this is the perfect kind of project to do when you have tight local budgets because you're able to leverage private and federal funds to do that. And so the ADA path will be established along the Main Street Mall, and you will be able to, in a wheelchair, be able to cross and get down this pathway, as well as on South Main, where we have a lot of broken sidewalks and infrastructure. That will be repaired. Again, things the city would have had to do anyway, but with this project, we're doing it quicker and leveraging other dollars besides local taxpayer dollars.
Your thoughts on ADA, and those improvements?
Specific to the bridge itself has a roadbed on the Arkansas side that goes down, but it goes down at a 3% grade. The ADA standard, it has to be less than 5%. So we don't have to make any modifications to the bridge.
That's good. Okay. And the Mississippi River Trail, do you want to fill us in on what is, I think I know what that is, but pretend
It's
I
a
don't.
trail that runs from Minneapolis all the way down to New Orleans along the river. Most of it right now is on existing roads, and they actually designated the Harahan Bridge as their crossing point back in the 90s. They saw these empty roadbeds, and we're looking forward as a visionary. And if you are driving around downtown, you'll see little MRT signs on both sides of the river. And people do cycle it from various sections of it. They're quiet roads, not much traffic on them. And obviously a destination city like Memphis or West Memphis, this is a goal for these cyclists to get to, stop, stay, eat dinner, find a place to stay, and leave some money behind.
And let's talk, we've skipped the issue of time frame. Let's go, I'll start with you. What is the time frame for the various segments, the various phases of this being done, started and completed?
The first phase is going to be the bridge, and they're going to probably put that out to bid in July or August, start construction in the fall, and be finished about a year from now. I believe the Main Street portions are going to be lagging that by 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months to a year. We're going to try to slow walk if you call it slow walk, it's a very aggressive schedule. And part of the reason for that is the federal government with this grant award has a lot of very strict deadlines that we have to comply with. But we want to take the Main Street improvements in a pace that does not shut down the entire Main Street Mall or the entire Main Street, because we have existing businesses, obviously, that we do not want to harm. So we're trying to phase that in a way that will mitigate any damage to existing businesses.
Will the trolley line interrupted at various times?
The goal is not to interrupt the trolley line, and so that means some night work and some issues with that, and that will keep the businesses from being interrupted as well. We'll have issues with some residents, and we're going to have to work with those residents to communicate that far in advance and mitigate any harm that's caused by doing construction at night.
Right. And Paul, on your end, the timing of construction starting and ending?
It's similar to phase 4.
Okay.
It shouldn't lag far. I mean, the bridge section. I'm calling it by the phases, but it should start this fall and hopefully be completed by this time next year.
Bill.
The view is going to be unprecedented. Looking north on the river from that north side of the Harahan Bridge. And in planning this, you're not just planning, as I understand it, for people to go across it. You have to also account for people stopping to look at the river there. That's one of the engineering concerns,
Yes.
correct, Greg?
There's small overlooks over the piers. They're about 8 foot long and 2 foot wide. They're not big overlooks, but enough where you get out of the flow of traffic. You can stop, take a look, take a picture.
And also Union Pacific, the railroad, has had security concerns too, so there will be some kind of, I think, mesh type fencing separating the boardwalk from the actual rail part of the bridge.
There's a very tall fence, about 9 foot tall fence with a curved top, a very tight mesh. It's non-climbable. It's also a tight enough mesh that if objects fall off the railroad, they won't fly over and hit the pedestrians, and pedestrians can't throw things at the train.
So what kind of an economic generator is this on both sides of the bridge with people coming with their bicycles, and what does that create or add to what's already there on both sides of the bridge?
I think that's really the key thing. And the example I use is the Big Dam Bridge in Little Rock. It's a spectacular bridge built on top of a dam. It's 6 miles from downtown Little Rock over the Arkansas River in a community of 600,000 people. They tell me on Saturdays and Sundays they get 16 to 18,000 people in a day going across the bridge. Our city is 1.2 million. Our bridge is right in downtown Memphis over the Mississippi River. We could have huge numbers on the weekend. And to take that the next step further, let's say it's a slow day on a Saturday, there's 10,000 people that cross the bridge. 80% of them are going to walk out to the middle, take a picture, and walk back to the car from the Memphis side. That leaves 20% going on towards Stewart's and West Memphis, could be 2,000 people. They may not make it all the way there, but if 10% of those make it, that's 200 people a day in the city of West Memphis. That's a big economic driver. That's the biggest benefit is percentage-wise in West Memphis. Obviously, it's going to be a bigger benefit for the city of Memphis, but these type of structures get visitors all the time. People love to have a view of the water and a view of the city, a short walk from downtown.
It doesn't. In some ways, it goes back to the Green Line and the skeptics, or well, maybe cynics in hindsight, who said, "Well, no one's gonna go on a straight path, in the middle of nowhere. It's not going to be safe." But from even before it was officially opened, it was populated, and now it's. I don't know what the numbers are every day that use the Green Line, but it's a huge number.
It really is, and it creates people who wouldn't normally get outside because it's a safe infrastructure, and the bridge is going to do that, but multiplied because of the views, because of the spectacular setting, and because of the proximity to the existing trails, the existing downtown. It's about a mile from Beale Street up to the bridge.
And let's talk about a thing people raise, concerns about safety. Safety, and let's go two parts. One, and this was a big issue, or at least it was raised, and the media maybe made too much of this, but safety in terms of crime. In terms of this 10-mile corridor you're talking about, you're comfortable. I guess most of this is pretty populated, but there's no real crime issue from your point of view?
Well, the Green Line proved that out. There was a lot of concerns about that. But what happens with these things, there's so many people on them. If you're a criminal, you have no place to commit a crime because there's witnesses all the time. And the density of users is going to be so high that they're going to find someone else to commit crimes.
Safety from a different point of view, which is biking. You get more and more bikers. You get in the Green Line is protected from cars, obviously, in the areas you talked about where there are posts and so on. But going down Front Street at a fairly busy time of day, rush hour in the morning or something like that, if you have the bike lanes but without any protection there, are you concerned for that there's enough protection, enough safety for the bikers who are on those roads?
It depends on what your goal is. If you're a commuter, you're probably a confident cyclist and you know how you handle yourself. But if I was a cyclist, I wouldn't be on Front Street, I'd be on the riverfront because there's wide open paths to ride your bike on, and there's not that many people down there.
Okay.
For the bridge itself, what I suspect is going to happen is there's going to be so many people on it, you'll be walking your bike across until we build on the south side, and that's my future plan.
And let's talk about that for a second, because the animations that we've shown from the site show a path on both sides, the north and south side. In the first phase, and the funding we've talked about, there's really only funding and plans for the north side path.
Absolutely.
But that second side that people have seen in the animation, that is a hope.
That's a hope. We'd like to see that. And what I hope is going to happen, there's going to be so many people on the bridge, there'll be a public comment. We need more space. I want to be able to ride my bike. I want to be able to relax and get across here.
And the private development community, speaking of economic development, just for the prospect of this project, just talking about it, have already made plans and trying to invest, assuming there's going to be a lot of traffic around there. Henry Turley Company is looking at the South End neighborhood, which right now is desolate and is not contributing much at all to the local tax base. But they're talking about spending $16 to $20 million to build more apartments and putting bike lockers because it's on the path of the Main-to-Main project. And other developers as well have contacted us saying, hey, we want to develop along the Main-to-Main project because we think that's going to bring a lot of traffic.
Paul, what are you hearing from the merchants on Broadway about this?
Well, they're starting to get hear the story. They're starting to get excited. Just a little side note: this may open up our area for cross country cycling because now we'll have a great avenue for them to get across the river. And Arkansas is relatively flat, so that would be a good state to ride across if that's your pursuit. We're also seeing some opportunities for redevelopment on our east end and around the trail, and we started to explore planning for that and talking to property owners, letting them know what's coming, getting their excitement level up. So we see lots of opportunities for us to take advantage from an economic development perspective also.
In terms of French Fort, that's an area of tremendous potential, which is right at where the trio of bridges are. Greg, what's the latest from the state in terms of a traffic roundabout there, which is considered the key to access to that area?
My understanding, that plan for the roundabout is moving forward. I have not heard a start for their construction, but I believe that's a funded project. They're going to have the majority of the freeway traffic is going to bypass the roundabout and go directly onto I-55. But if it's local traffic, it'll go to the roundabout, and there will be a spur that goes into the French Fort neighborhood. But bringing that up, something we're looking at as part of the green print planning, an entirely different grant, is looking at planning a trail underneath the bridges that will get towards the Metal Museum, Crump Park, DeSoto, and connect the French Fort neighborhood to downtown, expanding the riverfront.
Right, and this is an area that is going to be a hot spot for cyclists. This is going to be ground zero for people coming to our side and leaving from our side to go to the other side of the road.
There's Martin Luther King Park farther south. There's T.O. Fuller Park farther south. We can get there. There's going north. There's Shelby Forest and the Eagle Lake Refuge. You can find a way to make those connections, and that's what happens in other cities. They build this kind of infrastructure that's a magnet, and then other people want to connect to it. You want to make more connections, more greenways, more access for the entire region.
And right now, from within the kind of Memphis, Shelby County area, really briefly, you can get basically from Germantown, Bike Lane, all the way, I mean, when this is done, I should say, all the way downtown, beyond Germantown, I mean, Wolf River, that kind
The
of
Wolf
area?
River Greenway is going to connect out to Collierville, and that's another really exciting project, a greenway following the path of the Wolf River.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all three for being here. Thank you, Bill, for being here. And thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.